Hello and welcome to Perceptual Supplements number 5. This is our first installment of a mega episode that I'm calling Conceptual Compliments. How that works is I take a few days break from rattling off these short little videos, and then we review them with some fresh eyes and try to distill what the hell I'm getting at in my long babble. Here's how we're gonna do that, and that's in super speed. Let's blow through the first episode and see if we can get the whiff of what's going through my head a few days ago here as I'm rattling all this off. This one is episode 1, Environment and Spaces. So on environment is everything that surrounds our body, like our physical actual body, and spaces are what our senses put together out of our sensory data into a space. They form our perception. And our environment and our spaces work together in an act of creation, reciprocal creation, whereas through artifice, through creation, we make and reshape our environment in the form of our spaces, and our perception, our cognition and perception and constant relation to our environment form our sense of space and spaces. And for McLuhan, different senses had different spatial properties. Nowadays, we often conceptualize our sense of space in n-dimensional, let's call it n-dimensional configuration, parameter spaces, because in modern day we go around and we measure everything, and we put the model into a computer and we build mathematical models, and then as we study those models we sort of learn and internalize them as our way of perceiving reality. So the way we look at strangers on the street might accord to the basic Okay, let's n-dimensional parameter space. I think I came up with that term last month or something when I was talking about graphic equalizers and parametric equalizers. So audio equipment or any electronic device where you got a control panel full of knobs, right? So let's think about you've got some audio coming in from your audio recording and you want to do some equalizers. You want to bring out, some high frequencies and lessen the bass, up the treble, right? Like the audio, like the equalizer on your stereo, right? So you're going to have a whole bunch of little controls. Let's say it's a parametric equalizer, so you're going to have, the frequency and the bandwidth that you're adjusting and the gain on that, right, for one particular parameter. And then you got another one, and then you've got a low pass gate and a high pass gate. If you don't understand what that means, all I'm saying is that you got a control panel with a whole bunch of knobs, and every single time you change a knob, you are changing the state of the machine, and the machine can be in as many states as many possible combinations of settings on the knob, right? So we're going to call each knob a possible parameter. And in 3D, you got X, Y, and Z. Z, X, Y, right? So this is like, say, up and down and left and right and forward and back, right? These are the three main dimensions in 3D space. And then all of these change over time, right? Time goes forward and things move around in space. And this is the Newtonian way of looking at our physical environment, that our bodies exist in. Our bodies are 3D objects existing in 3D space, especially when our rooms are made of, rectangles and squares where everything's at a 90-degree angle, right? What I've blown through here is this idea that these models that we project onto the world change based on not just our thoughts and ideas and beliefs and philosophies and sciences, but on our body's constant interaction with and making up of its perception of our spaces here. And that nowadays we've left 3D space, or our bodies have left 3D space, while our minds and perception and language still remain anchored in what looks like 3D space, because what our bodies learn to work within, to acclimate, right, it's sort of like we get used to so many more dimensions of our space than just the physical three-dimensional one, because all of our senses can, by all the control we've taken over our environment, massage our body into perceiving things in an infinite number of ways. Remember, the environment, I'm using these two words with very specific, precise meaning, and that's a large part of what McLuhan does and takes on from poetry is learning how to. It's like Hercules clearing out the Augean stables. You got to sort of gush out the wrong use of words, or imprecise use of words, or sloppy use of words, in order to reestablish them properly. And that means coming up with whole new ways of speaking and perceiving things. So I'm here using environment to mean what lots of people would call objective, except environment explicitly deals with no abstractions, explicitly deals with the material world on the outside of the body. And then space is explicitly, it's sort of like subjectivity, except it's inside of you, and it's, again, only about perception of the environment, no abstractions. So, no abstractions, which means words or math or laws or propositions, right? No abstractions, just the environment on the outside versus the space on the inside, including your actual body, right? Everything within, right? So it's very much about embodiment. There's my little dude, yeah, bro, right? So he's living in space and he's surrounded by his environments, and I don't know why I flipped that backwards, but that's okay. So sort of a different way of thinking about objectivity and subjectivity, but I can't use those words. Those words are loaded. They've got tons of meaning, and of course, my friend Scott would say John Dealey says we use them all wrong anyway. So let's just skip those and talk about environment versus spaces, because spaces are not just interior to you, they're interior to you as a social, communicating, collective being who shares and co-creates spaces with other people. Let's keep watching here. Census, for instance, or the way that demographers subdivide society into different parameters to help their marketing or propagandistic appeals. Now, a couple hundred years ago, the West, as it were, entered into Newtonian Cartesian space with physics. And so our material bodies existed in relation to the world of 3D painting, perspective painting, three-dimensional perspective painting. If you do 3D modeling to take your X, Y, Z axes, you can think of space as those three parameters, right? X, Y, and Z, right? Forward, backward, left and right, up and down. This is 3D. This came in about 500 years ago into our spatial perception of our environments, and architecture and physics and all of our sciences grew up within this space. About 100 years ago, 150, between 150 and 100 years ago, this all collapsed and exploded into what in art is seen as cubism, let's say, or modern painting, with Einstein and Minkowski blowing apart Newtonian physics, and with the telegraph destroying the sense that messages which are sent are written on physical objects that travel through, say, the mail, or get tied to the leg of a pigeon, or a piece of paper tied to a brick that you throw at someone. Right? A message was tied to physical matter moving through physical space up until the telegraph. All right, so this is some of the famous McLuhan long-scale history here, and what I'm giving here is a history of spaces, and spaces only sort of roughly correspond and overlap and include the environment. Like, which facets of the environment are we including in our cultural perception of spaces as the way that's instantiated in our language usage and our artwork? So if you got a whole bunch of 3D paintings, perspective paintings happening starting, say 500 years ago. Whoa, it's 3D. Oh my goodness, things are getting bigger as they get closer to us and they get further away as right. It's pretty bad, but you get the idea. Anyway, that's something that came in with the printing press, coincided with the printing press, and if you follow McLuhan was caused by the printing press. For the sake of this discussion, we're going to go with that. What you've got happening is the rise of industry and the industrial age and factories everywhere and mass production. This is where Jean Baudrillard says, simulation takes off, because you can have a whole bunch of identical objects all being mass produced, and you can now print paintings, and you can buy paintings that no one even painted. They were mass produced prints, right? There were bowls and vases which were no longer handmade, but were stamped out of a mold on a giant machine, right? Looms are weaving carpets, mechanical looms, right? So objects in and of themselves stop having identity in and of themselves, and the simulation starts for Baudrillard. But everything becomes a linear process of manufacture, just like the linear lines of text on a page, right? So this is about the space which people who are born into the world and feel out in a Piagetian sense, they play around with and find out what the world is made of and learn how to be comfortable in the world and how objects work. They're learning that objects, right, intuitively, subconsciously, the logical propositions in their head amount to a hill of beans compared to what their body's intuitive learning understands about what their environment is. And what their environment is something that's not real, something that's manufactured and machinic, right? So, and then I go on to talk about the telegraph, and I started off with all the many parameters which comprise the n-dimensional, what I'm calling the n-dimensional parameter space, which has succeeded the which has finally come in to try and reorder postmodern or electric all at onceness. And that's owing to our seizing of a computer simulation and obsessive measurement through cameras and sensors everywhere and tracking all over the place. Everything goes into a giant grid nowadays to be measured and optimized within a simulation of reality, which we all too easily take to represent reality itself. You can get very far by assuming that everything that science tells you is real. And you've sort of externalized your thinking to this process, which is in fact quite trustworthy, but also for all the more for being so trusted, so often trusted, and being so hard to scrutinize without specialisms, it's all the more tempting to corrupt science for other gains, right? So this space, the social space in which we try to make sense and order our world, is one of measuring every single possible attribute about everything and throwing it into models, and then seeing what, and then making sense of the world vicariously through that. And notice this is something that's done more through media and more through communication and listening to others than it is through something directly experienced through physical interaction with the world. I think that's probably it for episode 1 here. Our spatial perception of our environments, and our environment started creating spaces through our body relation to it, through means which transcended and destroyed and messed up our whole perception of time and space. Hope that makes that, well, on one hand, I hope that clears up. Yeah. Okay, so destroys time and space. Right, what does that mean? It means time and space was, I'm not going to say socially constructed, because what society says is, again, very minuscule. That's compared to what making your way through the world each day teaches you about what the world is. And so in a world full of factories and machines where clocks have, sprockets and gears, and, they all, work on, do, and you got this thing, right? And everything springs and levers, right? It's all fine mechanical clockwork and assembly lines, right? The world seems like it all adheres perfectly to the laws of physics. Now, another thing besides the telegraph, which came in the 1800s or the 19th century, um, you have electricity, which, as I said, short circuits space. So because electricity, because a, a conductor, a wire stretched really, really long, changes its state all at once. Messages don't actually flow down a telegraph wire, right? Yes, there is an electronic, right? Electrons flow, but electrons do not represent the units of a message. The message is the state change of the wire, which changes across its width or its length all at once, right? So there's no movement down a wire per se for messages. Messages have become decoupled from physical movement of physical objects going through space, right? As soon as the ability to communicate becomes decoupled from physical objects traveling through physical space and instead become dependent on the state change of a still, static, unmoving object, you've created a parameter where the spaces in which we co-subjectively coexist with each other are have transcended, have exceeded what Newtonian physics and its applicability to... Oh god, I'm going to have to make another video explaining this video, aren't I? The point being, so electricity destroys time and space, but another interesting change is the science of thermodynamics and entropy, which came in, of course, with like steam engines and people noticing how heat and energy tend to flow and normalize into a sort of general sameness in an irreversible way, which right, the flow of energy in thermodynamics isn't reversible the same way that perfect mechanical monkey motion of Newtonian physics is reversible. So as we start to think of new models and get a feel for the way that the world works in all these ways which transcend the laws of physics within which the modern world was built, our language and our perception of the solid, real material world and our body's feeling of it sort of lags behind. Our language to describe how it is we're feeling and how our bodies relate to this new environment full of illusions and ghosts and of pixels and paints and celluloid, flickering celluloid images and whatnot, by which I mean, of course, film. That's what celluloid means. Right? You end up basically divorcing the language of culture away from the physical reality, especially when you don't understand how the media works. Maybe especially when you only see the surface appearance of things. And I think I get to that more in the second episode. Let's find out. All right, this is episode 2 of Perceptual Supplements, where we take by McLuhan between space of artificing our artificial civilized world, cosmopolitan, like city-dwelling world. Within nature at large. We can look at how this is more talked about more commonly, since the Newtonian and Cartesian world has blown up with electricity and new physics conceptions that go beyond physical matter, like quantum physics and relativity and whatnot. So now we're in the postmodern age of social construction. So everyone has their own idea of what their environment is made of. Constructivism, which goes from, let's say, Giambattista Vico, a couple hundred years ago, up through Jean Piaget in our century, or actually in the 20th century. There's this idea that we sort of feel out and model and get an idea of our environment and build our idea of what space we're in. And we develop our mind and our cognition, our perception, and ourself through constant experimentation and play in relation to our environment. So babies sort of, feel their bodies out, and feel their mother's breast, and then feel, the world and their crib, and get a sense of where the boundaries of their bodies meet the outer world, and play with things, and so slowly learn how physics works and how objects work and how gravity feels and how machines, monkey motion, causality plays out, and more, so But this is through play. This is through modeling the world and testing those models, and sometimes they work and sometimes they fall apart. And so this is constructivism. Now, we are born into the world of the external surface appearances of things. So you can look at a TV, and unless you get up really close and you notice the phosphors, the red, green, blue phosphors, and or liquid crystal elements, which are variously changing to afford a backlight to shine through them, or of course LED lights turning on and off, comprising the fundamental image of on the TV. Unless you get up really close and look at it and go, oh wow, this is just red, green, and blue light flickering all over the place, right? If you see a TV screen, what you're really looking at is the content, the movie, or the TV show, or the live video stream, or the CG graphics, or whatever. We see the surface appearances of everything. My chest of drawers here is made of wood, and my bookshelf up here is made of compressed fiberboard that looks like wood. But I know that out of experience of having, seen what they're made of. To the naked eye, they both look like black painted wood, right? Surface appearances. How do you get through the surface appearances of stuff? Well, you either figure it out, or you just get told what's going on beneath the surface appearances of stuff. And right now, all our technology is so complicated, most people are so distracted and busy with the particulars of their life that they don't get to the bottom of anything, and they pay other experts or listen to other people to tell them what it is that I'm looking at. What am I looking at? I can't tell what it is. I'm going to go ask someone else to tell me what I'm looking at, and I'm going to trust them. I'm going to see the world through their perception, whatever they describe to me. I'm going to see, there we go. That's my idea of spaces, right? Spaces are socially constructed. And by socially constructed, I mean you can get far in life if you have friends and authorities that you can trust to tell you what's going on and help you get through things, and within your communication with them, which is trustworthy and reliable and good enough to work, pragmatic enough to work. Lots of people don't need to know how any of the machines around them work. They don't know how to change their own oil in their car. They don't, right? They needn't go do all the work to find out what opinion or they should have on some issue, or who it is they should vote for at any given time, right? We don't all need to have our own barometers and our own wind socks and our own weather vanes on our house to go and try and figure out whether or not it's going to rain this afternoon. We can rely on the communication and existing within a shared space with other people. This is how we come together, and especially, obviously, this is scaled up at huge scale into what McLuhan called the global village, global theater. And I really like what B.W. Powell has advanced to the global membrane. It's very much a very organic, chthonic kind of word. So because we're all so connected, because we, again, to use language I'm trying to get away with, because my subjectivity is largely built up in communication with your subjectivity, but that's sloppy, right? Because we are co-creating and sharing and working within the same headspace, which becomes our space of operation. Because I'm sitting here dealing with canvas and a fake pencil and a little image of me and a big image of me, and I'm talking to an audience of people supposedly on the internet, and I don't feel at all in touch with the bookshelf behind my head or my butt getting numb on this chair, right? Our bodies are superfluous to lots of the spaces in which we have in which our actions are taking place, because the only actions that matter, the only actions I have to be conscious and pay attention to, are the ones that happen from the waist up, with my voice in this microphone and making sure I hit all the buttons properly to move this along, and that helps me exist in your perception watching me. And we've created this cyberspace, as I've called it. I've written a bunch of papers trying to flesh out this idea of spaces and cyberspace being insofar as aspect of our being concerned, a real space. Cyberspace is real, and that's because our embodiment is subordinated. My numb ass and everything else is cut out of the picture of caring. The less I feel about, right, the less attention I pay to my body, the more focused I am on bringing the fullness of my being into the few parameters which this medium of a webcam and a microphone and a screen capture here can capture. My embodiment is subordinated to my being in media, right? This is why the medium is so important. This is the root of dualism, which is a Gnostic concept. There's lots of reading in the field of media ecology, especially as pursued by Marshall McLuhan, that you can read about precisely that. But it's worth fleshing out, as it were, just what that means, because what it means is you've developed a self which exists in spaces which don't necessarily include all of your body, because if spaces require social participation, well, if that social participation needn't be co-present, which is another word for immediate or embodied, in a social sense that Neil Postman uses. Neil Postman likes to say we ought to be co-present in developing ourselves as opposed to being on the other end of a telephone line. So let's pick it up and see where the hell I'm going with this now. What is happening. This is a role of specialism, because ultimately we're just kind of on our own little, like, our bodies are related to our immediate environment, and then what's going on beyond these four walls or beyond the view afforded me by my window here, I just rely on word of mouth, or what is seen inside the virtual space of my computer screen or my television. And I say virtual because because it is a space, but it is not a real environment. The real environment is the medium itself in front of my face, the TV screen or the computer as a physical object. But the space, which is my constant interaction with these highly complex, deceiving, illusion-creating machines on their surface present to me for direct interaction, teaches and entrains and pulls my space into something which is not real, but in front of me, right? That's the content of the medium. And so think about all that our senses put us in touch with is our immediate space. When I said my four walls, I really mean that I'm not, the way that we evolved as animals, in touch with anything beyond these four walls and what I can see out my window. And yet, if I've got a computer in front of me, right, then that's connected to the outside world, and it presents to me an image of the total planet, right? According to satellite, let's say, to roughly paraphrase, the satellite environment that gives me this discarnated, sort of partly abstracted, largely imaginary feeling that I'm in touch with the whole planet whenever I'm on my computer, or 150 years ago when I'm staring at the front page of my, newspaper. All right, because basically, the content of a medium is an illusion. Your senses can only show you what's in front of your face. It takes a great deal of practice of learning how to read, learning how to process so-called information, learning how to turn the surface appearance of things into this imaginary being of in touchness with the fullness of the entire planet, or the contents of a book, or, right, to literally change the space which we inhabit out of our bodies, because our bodies are always forever just trapped in here. So there's a great word cognitive scientists use, exaptation. And exaptation means something was evolved for a purpose, and then we sort of hijack that purpose, or hijack that thing, and utilize it for a new thing which it had not been used for before, but it can, we can make do with using it for this new purpose. So our senses, which put us in our own little private, as I like to call it, flat Earth, of nothing exists beyond the horizon, and the world looks flat to me, so the world might as well be flat, right? There's very few clues that the world is round, until you get into an airplane or a spaceship or climb a mountain or watch a boat, sail out to sea or something like this, right? The world sure as hell seems flat as far as your senses are concerned, and we evolved in a spaces which for the most part were flat Earths until until we learned to feel like the world was round, and we learned to feel like, for instance, in my case, this way is north, so Europe is down there, right, and Australia's over there, right, like the space that I feel like I'm embodied in living, because I've seen a globe enough times. I can kind of imagine that if I look down, all right, China's over there, right, like I can kind of pretend like I'm in touch with the planet beneath me, even though there's nothing in my immediate senses that betray that, right? So that exaptation of our senses for our faculty of imagination, of extending our sensibility beyond the surface appearance of things. Again, hope that made things more clear. That's what I'm getting at. And then the difference between our environment being always this local, proximal, material place, and the spaces we inhabit, which is sort of this interior thing, again, that is dualism. And when your being gets too far away from your embodied sense, that's what we're calling the discarnate state. All right, let's keep going and see if I've spoken ahead of myself here. Right, books have contents. Right, there's all these speculative fantasy and science fiction worlds inside of these hunks of paper with little black symbols on all types of graphical letters. As we learn and enter into the spaces of our imagination, into this content, we create all sorts of we mire ourselves in more and more complex, infinite spaces, which do not actually exist, and we can use to simulate and model infinite spaces. All right. When you go into content, you enter infinite spaces. That's because learning to read is not to gain Xray vision. If you were to get Xray vision, you could pierce through the surface appearance of your book and go see the glue that's binding all the pages together and the thread that's holding all the leaves together, right? Or if you had Xray vision on and you looked at your computer, you'd be able to see, your motherboard and your CPU, and you'd see all your expansion slots, and you'd see the fan inside the housing on your video card spinning around, trying to keep up with your, rendering your 3D composited desktop or whatever the hell, right? If you saw through your computer case, you'd just see a bunch of circuitry inside. But if you look at your TV, you would just see a bunch of circuitry inside, right? That was what Xray vision would give you. But it would still be immediate. If you Xray vision is too far out there, you can think of if you had a screwdriver. Right? You could take it apart and see what's inside, right? Now that's see, when you learn to look at content, there's no ground, there's no bottom. Your imagination is literally the bottom of the possibilities of how much you structure your penetrating sense through the surface appearance of a book. Once you learn how to read a book, you can take it literally, or you can interpret it metaphorically, or you can, subvert and deconstruct its meaning and try to psychoanalyze the author. Or you can do all sorts of things with the content of a book going on forever and ever and ever, and that's because it's all play in your head, having little to do with your immediate embodiment. course, that's natural. It's actually extremely unnatural for me to go around insisting that people look at books as physical objects first, and to not see the images on a television screen except as pixels. No one does that. You can't help but see the content of media. That's what makes the content of media so powerful, is that you can't help, once you've learned to see it, to see that first and foremost, which right, all you can do is try to get more in touch with the X-ray penetrating vision, to try and keep one toehold in the material reality within which your body exists in relation, right? Right. Keep one foot in the space which does coincide with your actual environment. All right. World briefly through content, or conceptually and paradigmatically through the structuring of the media itself, such as the way books created the Gutenberg galaxy, according to McLuhan, with perspective painting, and this Newtonian Cartesian space took on the nature of the medium, typographical medium itself, and also created mythological, symbolic fantasy spaces within which more anthropomorphic entities and directly relatable characters can then be taken on as content and or as selves. Computer, of course, do the same thing, it's more complexity because there's so many more dimensions and parameters which are within our computer models of the world. Think about Cold War as a intelligence agents inventing game theory and trying to model what those Russians are going to do according to the game of Yeah. See, you see, this gets back to our whole idea of a timeline, right? You can imagine that a couple hundred years ago, maybe, and I'm not a historian, people thought of rulership as a chess game, right? And you got, so it's like, if you're gonna think of being a strategist, in the way that a king has to do, you got to play a lot of chess or something, right? Well, in the 20th century, with so much math and so much at stake, with atomic weapons and whatnot, of course, game theory became a serious way of modeling the world, and the world was operated. This is a form of cybernetics. Right, the space which is simulated inside of a mathematical model which is represented in a computer more often than not, or even just through a whole bunch of a chart, a whole bunch of pieces of paper for that matter, is taken to represent the world, and you operate the world through operating that model. And you sort of project that model onto the world, and if the world accepts that model as you project it onto them, you sort of cast a net of meaning onto the world, which gives you a new space within which everyone can operate, which is abstracted away, perhaps, from reality and more in touch with reality in other ways, right? And once you learn, is that the game we're playing? And you're now empowered with new moves, which can take place in that game. Once you understand your relation to the other person and the space within which you are coexisting. See what I'm getting at here? War, right? And they've created these model worlds, and then 20 years later, everyone's creating model worlds with tabletop gaming, right? World building, fantasy world building, is a result of living in our multi-parameter, computerized electronic environment within the 20th century. Everyone knows how world building works because they're taking these. Yeah, exactly. Video games. Everyone, multiplayer video games. Everyone's playing within the same space. Space exists in your head because it doesn't exist in the real world except in the illusions, the surface representations, which you've learned to take in and make into a real space. You're right. World building. I mean, until Dungeons and Dragons got big 40, 30 years ago, world building was not even a thing. the term didn't really exist. There wasn't like this mass big hobby where everyone sat around creating, massive universes in their skull. That was something that, maybe fiction authors did, speculative fiction authors. But generally that was not like a regular activity, and it's because we have media within which we can create worlds, which then through our imagination we can enter into them, leaving our material bodies behind, sitting at our computer desks or our kitchen tables, left to roll dice and push buttons and otherwise are more of a nuisance or intrusion upon the immersion. Right, these things heavily psychological, and can only really be seen again from a grounding in the material I put forward was McLuhan's main thesis, which is to understand media. Let's skip ahead a little bit here.
Hey,
Oh yeah, this one.
welcome back to Perceptual Supplements, where
Yeah, welcome back.
Okay, so now about McLuhan, then you're going to take it's going to walk through one knockout. If you know them, this will help make sense how to bring his perceptions into the greater discussions and paradigms or concepts or whatever else our modern guys is discussed in terms of. So we're talking about know-how or applied knowledge. This is a term for the sort of knowledge which exists in the shared social space, the shared electric social space, and well, more so mechanical.
Okay, we don't have to watch this whole thing. What I said there is I wanted to place all these thoughts in the more popular and common terms, which is something I don't think I achieved in this video, but which we can appreciate now, perhaps more so. Let's see. Oh, we're doing pretty good here. Oh, look at all that, eh? Okay, let's go up here a little bit. All right. So let's see some terms so far. Simulation. Right, as a space in which your self can exist, your being can exist, your ego can be scaffolded. It can be scaffolded in the material with your body as part of it, so you know that rocks are hard, and you can run on asphalt, but you can't run through a swamp because your legs get bogged down in the mud, and right, you know that climbing a chain link fence is easier than climbing a concrete wall, right? There's all sorts of ways in which the physical world scaffolds your sense of being and tells you where to go and where not to go and what you can do and how fast, right? You can be a skateboarder or a parkour artist. And then, of course, there's the world of content of media, where you're indirectly manipulating illusions and have inculcated within yourself an imagination through the acceptation, as we said before, of our senses into this disembodied awareness, or this internal, inner-oriented, maybe without angering any psychologists, maybe introverted state, right? The ability to abstract at all, to think abstractly at all, or to project abstract scientific laws, such as the laws of physics or the laws of thermodynamics, or or general relativity, or to look at animals and imagine the processes of evolution as part of what is manifested before you immediately, like to look at some to look at your household pet Fido and to imagine the wolf thousands of years ago that was domesticated into this wiener dog or whatever you want. Right, this is all that extra layering, all that extra meaning is part of the space that you inhabit, that is sort of added onto and tries to transcend your immediate material space, which has scaffolded your embodied being. The rest of reality is scaffolded by this abstract stuff, which is reinforced by the rules in which media work. Right, the fact that television and cinema have jump cuts and fades as transitions, which tell you something about the passage of time, far more of an effect on your memory and your sense of self and your sense of identity and your capacity for remembering stories than the content of the movie or the TV show, which is some silly story, whatever it is. They all make use of a fundamental part of the grammar are these elements in the same way that the strokes of a paintbrush have meaning well beyond whatever the hell it is that the painting is, for how it is you come to understand the way in which your spaces are composed and how they scaffold your being in an interior sense. Yeah, when the abstract imaginary stuff overtakes and subsumes your physical realities, such that six identical objects are the same object, and you can say, hey, let's go to Harvey's without specifying which Harvey's that you're going to, and you can say you want a pickle on your Harvey's hamburger without pointing out to the person which pickle it is you want, right? Every pickle slice is the same pickle slice insofar as the meaning of the space, matters compared to you and the person building your hamburger at Harvey's, right? Right. The simulation is when the generic, or I think this is right, the platonic ideal, actually composes the substance of the space in which you live. Now you're trapped in simulation, and as Baudrillard would say, citing Krasipsky, the map has obscured and obliterated the territory. So the territory obliterated the territory. So if our minds were for mapping or for scouting and making sense and mapping our environment, well, guess what? The environment is now completely gone insofar as our being is concerned. Insofar as our being exists primarily in the shared social space, which we grew up in and were socialized into and understand purely in symbolic terms, such as words and whatnot. And this is what the postmodernists were all about: is the text, the importance of the text, and the importance of the language. I appreciate that's Jacques Lacan's whole thing. Is the very fact of calling someone father or mother, right, is more Freudian than the fact that you have a word such as father and mother with all the social meaning thus imbued, and this supposedly static categorical figure which sticks onto this ever changing enigmatic person who's different from every moment because isn't everybody, etc., etc. Right, the way in which our symbolic imaginary world maps onto the environments, right? How our space maps the environment. Well, it doesn't map the environment anymore. Space is its own self-referential, recursive thing, eating itself in endless remakes and flashbacks and nostalgic representations and revivals every few years, and the actual material ground is way too complicated for anyone to learn how it works. Oh yeah, and so then I just go on to look at a whole bunch of models, the way people try to abstractly model reality. Where does this space exist? So again, one thing that I think I need to emphasize is the jargon of contemporary critical theory, with words like decontextualized. How everything is decontextualized, meaning it exists in the space which doesn't belong anywhere. Or we are nomads, right? We are just traveling endlessly and drifting through this space which doesn't exist anywhere. That is, in fact, the case. And just because you can go and study the laws of physics and know that up is down, and know that the world is round, just because you can know that the world is round, because, the world is round and flat earthers are wrong, fine. But the intuitive, right, the reasons which flat earthers have for insisting that the world is flat, in the sense that everyone has lost touch with the ground of their embodied being, that proclivity to insist that the world may as well be flat is strangely, like paradoxically, more rooted in trying to earnestly get to the truth of the matter than taking everyone else's word for it. Right? It's like, yes, there's no giant conspiracy to convince everyone that the world is round and, send everyone posters of the blue marble and mass manufacture globes and brainwash airline pilots into thinking that they've taken shortcuts, that are impossible on the right. Like, yes, of course the earth is round. But how vicariously we trust that notion because it's something that happens in a space which is so removed from the reality of our embodied being, which tells us nothing about the shape of the Earth unless you've got a pair of calipers and a whole bunch of very subtle ways of figuring this out. That approaches the truth of the matter, right? Because all of our language is geared around looking at digital spaces as real spaces and augmented reality. Right, reality has been augmented for a very long time, much longer than it's going to take for people to start walking around with glasses on, with little like things on them that point out obstacles and tell you how many stars the restaurant that you're passing by has and what the credit card rating is of the person who you're passing and walking down the street, right? Yes, okay, we're augmenting reality literally with a literal medium that's actually overlapping, little graphics on top of the people walking their dog and the storefronts you pass. Fine. That's, but we've been doing that forever. That's just what having a sign in front of your store means. The fact that you can stick a sign in front of your store that says like butcher, and then like this little like thing of ham with a little bone coming out of it, right? That itself is an heavily augmented reality that tells someone what they can expect. Like, gives them a magical Xray vision to see through walls, and they know that on the other side of this brick wall there's a giant dude with an axe standing over half a cow carcass hacking away, right at some prime choice cuts of steak, right. That media is already augmented reality. Okay, we don't need stupid Google glasses to freaking do that for us. All that does really is completely take our choice in the matter out of it completely. Let's skip ahead to episode 4 here. Alright, welcome back to Perceptual Supplements. We are supplementing McLuhan with some general percepts, and we are supplementing your general perception of the world with McLuhan. Works both ways. Either makes things clearer or starts you on an adventure of learning more about media and media ecology through the work of Mark McLuhan. So we're going to determine the effects of media. We already had this rough historical overview where we compressed 500 years ago, things about a lot of style and games, like shirts, reading, Tony faces in developing Europe, and then the colonies Europe, their intellectual casting capacity for creating industry in the natural age, and then the creating machines for the world came through their the way in which learning how to read books, which became total dimensional printing as creating the system of linear logic, straight to world, X, Y, Z, were parameters of space which divides certain relationship. And after 100 years of the fall of telegraph and this second space, it's a statement with physics and Einstein, and also content to electric media being so captivating that the illusions on a TV screen and a cinema screen and now a computer screen and the models of the ways which we model the world through measuring everything in multidimensional parameter space has sort of thrown us into a chaos which is disembodied. It is discarnating. When we think within the content of immediately interactive media which uses so much of our senses, which takes so many of our senses and exapts their ability to place us in our immediate world, it exapts that ability to place us into an imaginary world of media content or models of the world, then we are now discarnated. We're out of our bodies. We're like tripping in a literal acid trip out of our bodies. It's like our bodies are leftover husks, and all of our actions are happening within something which our senses are being borrowed or exapted or pulled into, like a television is sucking the brain right out of your skull or whatnot. As why movies are captivating. Now, think about all the things all the important discussions and events in your life that make you who you are, the things that you, that change and upset the stability of your sense of being, right, that throw you into a momentary chaos, which you just then have to find new order to when you learn and grow as a person through that process and develop the resilience of being and whatnot. When those events happen on the internet, your body is not involved. Let's think of a very important conversation. Sort of conversation that you're having with a friend out in the park. Okay, yeah. Conversations. Again, so now that we've fleshed out this environment and space idea a little bit more, we can more properly address what I got to earlier, which is this sense of dualism. Now, you can hear cognitive scientists talk about this idea of the homuncular fallacy. And so a homunculus is like an old-timey word for basically a doll human, or a human which is missing the spark of life, but which is otherwise has all the material parts. So, right, like, what's the difference between life and not life, right? If you just had like a zombie, or a corpse, right? It's not alive. It's in the shape of a person, but it lacks vitality, right? This is all like old philosophical and religious sort of thoughts, right? It's a homunculus, right? And so the homuncular fallacy is to look at your body as you being a little self inside of your body, right? There's you. It's the real me. Oh, look, this is who I really am on the inside. And then there's your body. And the homuncular fallacy is to identify as the real you and to not identify as your body. And for some reason, what people still seem to have not really properly caught on yet is that this entire dualistic perception is precisely on account of the difference between our shared spaces, which include illusions and secondhand, empathetically gained accounts and stories and narratives and all sorts of indirect mediated spaces, and the mere space which we could choose to flesh out, and I'm using that deliberately, flesh out, which corresponds to our environment. So, here's the environment, and here's the space you inhabit. Whoa! And all the time you're talking to someone and talking about what happened to you last week, and you're watching a TV show together, and you're playing a game together, and you're talking about, you're making demographic projections about, women are going to vote this way in 2024, and men are going to buy more of this breakfast cereal next month, and children are going to be following this fad, right? As you talk in these generalized, abstract categories, which apply to other bodies in your environment only in this indirect, generalizing way. All the ways that you talk, which are not super specific about the relation of your body pointing at something here and now that you can pick it up and use it, right? That's the actual environmental space is very small, and your being exists within your imagination indirectly, socially, shared collectively amongst you and your friends and your family and your society. Your being exists in all these other spaces which exceed your proximal embodied environment, owing to the fact that you can look at a bunch of paint on a canvas and see a little pipe, but it's not actually a pipe. Ceci n'est pas une pipe. It's just a bunch of paint on a canvas that somebody painted with the paintbrush, right? So the idea here is that we, as our sense of self developed, in this story I'm trying to talk about, in this little, I'm trying to explain the scene of some important, life-changing thing that takes place through a conversation, say, on the internet, and a memory is formed of this thing, and a decision is made, and something about your life has been decided, and you say, I've thought it out, I've thought it through. But your physical body had nothing to do with it. It basically, its role was to sit there and house your inner real self, while your inner real self used your exapted senses to bring you into this hallucinated imaginary space where the decision was made and within which your being now exists. Your being, yourself, your ego existed in scaffolding within a non-existent, non-physical space. Now, the physical space is there the whole time. You can learn about it, right? You can get in touch with it whenever you want. It's just really boring. You just got to learn how and what all the objects are that are around you and where they came from. I mean, people who care a lot about where their stuff is manufactured, right, and want ethically sourced products to buy and ethically sourced foods to eat, they are in touch with something about the material reality, which within the Baudrillardian simulation, an egg is an egg is an egg, and you open the fridge and there's an egg and you crack it open and you've made breakfast. But You know, if you investigate where your eggs come from, maybe you'll spend an extra dollar on something that you feel more comfortable with, right? That's just one example of how our imagination can be used to bring us deeper into. My thing is understanding how computers work, because controlling them is important, and they're sort of everywhere, and no one understands how to do that. But this is the media ecology's lesson in a larger, more general sense. So, yeah, if anyone wants this, the silly poster we just made, is poster. I'm vastly overstating my artistic ability by calling it a poster, but hopefully this has sort of brought us a little bit more to the ground of what it is I'm talking about here. I'm gonna keep making those short little videos, but this is how, and every once in a while I might make another video like this, a conceptual compliments. Hold on. Let's pick something fancy here. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. A conceptual compliments. Bum bum bum. Where we try to actually go through in detail and pick apart what my little rants mean. But McLuhan, this is the thing. The fun thing about McLuhan is that it's not all delivered conceptually. It's not a framework. It is something you have to think about and put on. So I'd rather do funny little rants like this than structured, scripted stuff, right? But that's not to say I don't work on putting that stuff in my papers instead. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let's see, about an hour now. Yep, great. I think we're done. Enjoy the rest of your night, folks. Take care.